Hello and welcome, and a very good morning to the second edition of ETNA's India Economic Conclave. Now, this is our annual flagship initiative to create dialogues between policy makers and industry leaders on key issues related to business, economy, as well as governance. Now, when we kicked off the conclave last year, we lived in very different times. To start with, even those who don't know Hindi can now say "Achhe din" effortlessly. There is hope that Made in India tag will one day replace the ubiquitous Made in China that we see in every other product that we buy. Flights from the US to India seem to be running full, with everyone from Mark Zuckerberg to Jeff Bezos to Satya Nadella making a beeline here. The US President, Barack Obama, FYI, will also keep his date with India just next month. And nothing captures the change in sentiment more aptly than our conclave theme this year, India, the Giant Awakens. And that, of course, is going to be a glimpse of all that you're going to see today. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite the MD and CEO of Times Television Network, Mr. M.K. Anand, to deliver the welcome address. Anand.
When we first conceived of the conclave last year, as my colleague just said, things looked bleak all around. The buzzword was policy paralysis. Industry and investors were in a state of suspended animation, and the Aam Aadmi was highly uncertain about the future. After all, the annual growth rate had fallen sharply from a peak of 9% to just 4.5%. Fast forward to today, the mood couldn't be more different. In Delhi, we today have a government with the strongest mandate in more than 30 years. Industry is once again optimistic of reforms, stability, and growth. For a government which has been in power for just 6 months, Team Modi has demonstrated remarkable alacrity and agility. From big bang policy announcements and wins like the near denationalization of coal mines, to breakthrough at the WTO, to campaigns like Make in India, Jan Dhan, and Swachh Bharat, this government seems determined to move India along the right path, and fast. Growth, we believe, is not just the government's job. The government is an enabler for sure, but ultimately inclusive growth and prosperity comes from enterprise, from business, from persisting against odds and creating opportunities. And no one, ladies and gentlemen, knows that better than you. With that, let me once again thank you all for joining us today and wishing you a day of meaningful conversations. Thank you.
Anand, thank you for that. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the keynote speech that everybody this morning is waiting for. Our next speaker has the unenviable task of fixing India's economy and fixing it fast. He's a master in the art of debate and has professed a lifelong love for the Amritsari kulcha. We only hope that he's still able to make time for this small indulgence, even as he's working overtime these days to deliver a dream budget come February. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Union Finance Minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley.
In your introductory remarks, the young lady had mentioned that between last year and this year, the environment, particularly at this conclave, is entirely different. It's quite understandable as to why this difference has come about. And today I do feel not only do we have an opportunity to grow, cover up for the lost time, but also a great opportunity to emerge out of what is the fragile five in the global context. There is a visible slowdown as far as China is concerned. Brazil, South Africa, Russia not doing so well. Japan has slowed down. And therefore, if we are in a position to realize our optimum potential, a great opportunity lies ahead of us. And this great opportunity this time can't be squandered away, because if it is, then I think history is not going to forgive us. The external environment also is becoming favorable. The mood has changed. The way the world looks at us has changed. The young lady was right when she said flights from US are full of investors coming in. I'm not revealing a secret if I did disclose that almost half my day these days goes in meeting important international investors who've now started revisiting India. And I do believe, and our government does believe, that investor essentially is the chooser. If we don't provide him with quick decision making, we don't provide him with an effective opportunity, he has many other places to look at. I do hope we are able to strengthen this positive environment in the country, and I'm quite certain both the data in the coming months as also the feel at the ground that these policy changes and this enthusiasm will reveal will start showing its own results. I'm extremely grateful to ET Now for having invited me. And with every passing day, my optimism is on the increase. But I'd still understate the position rather than be overconfident about it, because I do believe that reforms, as the lady who introduced me mentioned, the big event is the budget. She's absolutely right. The big event is the budget. And therefore, budget is an opportunity to indicate some of the new steps we do take. But the other 364 days are equally important. And with almost every day, you have to continue to take the steps. In a large political democracy like India, a developing economy where most people have still not seen the benefits of this coming, or at least a large number of people, reforms are an art of the possible. And this art of the possible also involves carrying not merely your political friends, but a large amount of public opinion along with you, so that you are able to move forward with almost each of those 364 passing days. Well, thank you very much for having invited me for this.
Now, before, Abenomics became the buzzword in Asia, Swaminathan was already the household name in India. So with that, let me please welcome on stage ET Now's consulting editor, the irrepressible Swaminathan Aiyar, to moderate a discussion with the Finance Minister right here. I would also like to invite on stage founders of two iconic Indian companies, Bharti Enterprises Chairman Sunil Mittal and the elder statesman of India Inc. and co-founder of Infosys, Mr. Narayana Murthy.
Mr. Jaitley, on the one hand, you said fortune favors the bold and the brave. On the other hand, you also said, with some pride, we've managed to pass decisions which don't evoke any protest. To me, if you're bold and brave, you're going to evoke protest, and you have to overcome it. So I'm trying to understand in your coming budget, is it going to be a budget that is bold and brave and evokes protest, or are you going to say, I'm going to do something where nobody is able to protest?
Well, being bold and brave is one aspect. Being foolhardy and adventurous is quite another. And therefore, towards the end, I did indicate that reforms are an art of the possible. There's a huge amount of reforms, even in this generation, which remains to be done. And therefore, whereas you can put up ideas about the roadmap that you want to go in, which will involve very difficult steps, which will certainly invoke protests also. But I don't want the protests to block my road and not do the rest. And therefore, the art of the possible is you must keep consistently delivering. And the test really is that you should be clear about your roadmap, and that road should have no diversions.
Mr. Narayana Murthy, you have a question.
Thank you, Swami. It's a well-known fact that primary education, healthcare, nutrition, and to some extent shelter, these are all primary state subjects in India. Therefore, there is a school of thought that the current model of sharing the tax amounts between the state, between the center and the state is not a fair one, that they would want a greater share of money. Second, even though most of the corporations are registered in urban India, the Indian cities hardly get much money. So therefore the mayors, I have spoken to several mayors, they all say that look, we don't really get a proper share of the tax receipts. What are your views on changing this model so that the states get a fair share of the money and the cities also get some share of the tax money?
Empowering the states has been one of our critical beliefs, and that belief is partly also strengthened. I didn't have an experience in this, but the Prime Minister has repeatedly said that as a Chief Minister for over 12-13 years, that coming repeatedly with a bow to the center and asking for resources for any activity, it is this which has convinced him of the desire to decentralize this in the favor of the states itself. And I do hope that after tomorrow, whatever decision we take, probably the states will be much better off.
Very good. Mr. Mittal.
Is it good to go through halfway reforms? For example, GST now will be truncated to a point through compromises where it may lose its meaning? Or should we wait a little bit more to have the right form of reforms? That's a conundrum that we all think about, face, and I'm sure you apply your mind all the time to as well. Should we go with some compromises, or should we wait for the right moment?
I think between the two principal national parties, time has now come for India to speak at least on some issues of a shared vision. And that shared vision is not merely between the two national parties. Various institutions in a democracy, our regulators, our judicial institutions, the media is free, but a responsible line on the editorial pages at least. Do we have a shared national vision or not on certain issues? And I think if we move in that direction, things can happen irrespective of the government or which color of the government. And it's extremely important, while enacting GST, that the model of GST that is created in India is not a flawed model. You see, a flawed model will then take decades to be corrected, because you don't bring constitution amendments and correct those flaws immediately. But I think we are moving towards the closing point of that debate. One of the factors that delayed the GST was the lack of confidence which the states had in an earlier government. In 2009, you promised to give them compensation. Till 2014, you didn't give the states a rupee. So even though my financial position of the central government is facing a challenging situation, but I'm conscious of the fact that I'll have to start giving them their compensation in order to convince them that the center is going to be fair. If any of the states are going to lose revenue, I have to promise them a buffer for a certain number of years. And unless we have a big heart to do this, then to expect the states to surrender their taxation authority to this new instrument is not going to be easy. So the center will have to be liberal and large-hearted. And I think states, by and large, appear to be coming around if we can compensate them against the fear of the unknown.
I think we have time to take some questions from the floor.
My question relates to the vision of the Modi government over the Pakka Ghar for all by 2022. If India remembers Sher Shah Suri, it's because he constructed the Grand Trunk Road from Calcutta to Kabul. I think you'll be remembered for that if you can do it. But there are a couple of things there. So most of the things that we see on the stamp duty rationalization, they are state subjects. Like some states, they have stamp duty for 2%, some states they are 7%. Land is not free. My talk with people who construct these houses, the low affordable houses, they say that agriculture land, forest land, getting it converted. So is there something which we can do on this side just to ensure that the supply side is taken care of? There is enough demand. You can do a interest subvention or anything, but the supply side has to come up. There has to be these affordable homes where people can get into it. You can do a PPP, give them a plot of land in Connaught Place and tell them do something 50 kilometers off Delhi. We'll compensate you there. So is there anything that we are thinking on those lines? Thank you, sir.
Well, you're absolutely right. And that's why I used the phrase a shared national vision on some of these issues. And that is where not only the states, you will have a large number of other authorities and institutions who come in. For instance, the environmental department has given at the center a large number of clearances. You now require for them the wildlife clearance. The wildlife clearance doesn't even come from the states. It comes from a committee which the courts have appointed. And therefore, unless the last clearance is obtained, the projects don't take off. And I think some of these issues, you mentioned the experience of Sher Shah Suri, the highway. Look at what we've done to one of the most successful sectors of the Indian economy. Virtually contractor after contractors who build these highways is suffering from a liquidity problem. You have thousands of crores of those people struck up in disputes with the highway authority. Their projects have become non-bankable. And when government has come out, the authority has come out with tenders after tenders, you don't get a response from a single contractor. Because in the last 3-4 years, the institution of successful contractors who built these highways, they built them in the first 7-8 years, and in the last 2-3 years, we completely destroyed the liquidity. The minister, and I must compliment him, took a liberal stand and told the department, told the highway authority, please settle these disputes. A bankrupt industry is not going to build highways.
70% people are below 35, and mainly out of 10, 7 people are going mainly in IT. Mr. Narayana Murthy is also here. And a plan on the front of the national vision on agriculture and manufacturing for the young people who are coming into the system. You know, if even few % of IT sector goes little down, the repercussion may be too far off for the young people in the country.
Well, there's agriculture will always remain a strong priority as far as India is concerned. 60% plus are involved in agriculture. Your rural infrastructure, your expansion of your irrigation programs, diversification of your crops, the precarious financial health of the agricultural sector, the storage, the cold chains, linking them directly to the market. I think these are all areas which will, for any government in power at the center, remain a top priority area. And that is from where the local demand really picks up. And one of the reasons why last year, of course, we had a very good monsoon. This year it has been patchy. And that itself also has an adverse impact on our final data, also on the purchasing power. And therefore, for any government in power, that is going to be a top priority area. My regret is that because of the pressures on our revenues, the amount we have to spend on that sector is still less than what the sector needs.
You spoke about infrastructure and you spoke about the banking sector as well and the steps you're taking to kind of increase credit and so on. But if you look at the short or the immediate term, the offtake of credit still seems to be fairly weak. And the infrastructure sector is going through some really severe and intense pain. So would you have any thoughts as to what could be done on an almost immediate basis to make sure that the offtake of credit improves, and particularly towards the infrastructure sector?
Well, I had a meeting 2 weeks ago with the chairpersons of all the banks. And I can't agree with you more. As a result of what happened in the last 3 years, the NPAs of the bank, and I'm not saying this is on account of any reckless lending, this could also be on account of the general slowdown in the economy, from an acceptable figure of about 2% have crossed 6%. And with restructuring, the total stressed assets are still more. So in a closed-door meeting, I asked them a straightforward question. Has that put you on the back foot? Are you now defensive and careful about lending? And is that one of the reasons? Some of them said no, particularly some of the better banks said no, we are still willing to go ahead. But then credit offtake from the public sector banks has come down because alternative options of much cheaper credit are now available to a large number of them. And therefore, some of them very clearly said that the alternative credit options of capital which is available to us is much better. And therefore, people have stopped coming to us. And I do feel that for a long stretch of period, high interest rates, and this is virtually affecting, when somebody mentioned real estate along with infrastructure, therefore for people to pay higher EMIs, for people to build highways at 12% and 13% interest, for people to establish new businesses, representatives of the industry have come up and even asked me that the limits between foreign capital and Indian capital, which is allowed to some overseas investors, now needs to be enhanced because I have an option of getting credit at 3%. Why do you want me to take it at 12%? And therefore, I think this, for a long period, the cost of capital going up is hurting us. And at this stage, I think time has just about come to reconsider this factor. And I think in translating the data on the ground, it will go a long way if this were to happen sooner than later.
Thank you very, very much. And we all look forward to a bold and brave budget.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.